Hi, I'm Hartmut Günther. I'm fortunate enough to facilitate the mindfulness class at a world-class recovery center, and this is a recording of one of the sessions we've had. In actual fact, we just had it yesterday, and today's the 30th of April 2020. Obviously, well, maybe not so obviously, but the classes now are conducted completely online, and the coronavirus obviously has something to do with that. So this is a recording, and every week, the classes are conducted once a week. Every week we focus on a particular aspect of mindfulness, and this week we focused on vulnerability. So hope you enjoy it, and see you next week. Next week we're going to be focusing on listening, which is a core part of mindfulness. Thank you. I said this before. The nice thing about mindfulness, it basically touches on every aspect of life. And if you touch on one little thing, it opens up a whole thing that we can see is connected to other things. So it's quite an interesting topic to explore, and that's probably why I like it so much. So that little mandala thing that you see, I thought over weeks and however long you're here, we just use it as a tool, perhaps as an exercise to go around. And last week, Dean kicked it off by, and you can either thank him later or beat him up or whatever you're going to do to him. In regards to, he mentioned vulnerability, which is on that thing. So what I thought of vulnerabilities, what I thought we'd do is finish with that, but the way, because I'd had some material before that has to do with vulnerability. So part of that material is a 20-minute video presentation, not by me, but by a woman called name is Brown, but her name is Brené Brown. And some of you may have already seen that video. It's a 20-minute video. And every now and then you bring in material to these talks, these classes, from leaders in the field. When I mean leaders, I mean people who have either devoted their life or decades of their life exploring an aspect that we're about to talk about. And that's extraordinarily powerful in this day and age, where we can avail ourselves of someone's wisdom like that, simply through this medium that we're doing right now, or just watching a YouTube video or something else, another presentation. So what I've got lined up, maybe we'll have an initial 20-minute little chat, and then maybe I will show that video. It's an audio that you're going to be hearing, and then if we got time after that, we can have a little 5-minute meditation. But just the thing about meditation, 1 minute of meditation is better than 0 minutes of meditation. In other words, a little bit of something is better than nothing of something. And in life, things take on a momentum, and we can be lucky and have a deep experience and a deep understanding by having one exposure to something. But generally in life, it doesn't happen that way. In other words, basically, we're pretty thick, to put it bluntly. We need to be introduced to something and maybe hear it many times in our life before it actually clicks. And then the one day we're exposed to it and we're right and everything lines up, it clicks. And when something like that happens, it's quite profound, and it can deepen or change the course of the experiences in our life. So it's quite, this is my experience. So vulnerabilities. I didn't actually get a chance, and I'm sort of putting you on the spot. And by the way, when I suggested that we go around this sort of mandala thing and pick things, maybe at the end today, someone, just like we're doing for the nutrition class, just to keep the class as interactive as possible, and to keep us all awake. When you just have someone monologuing on, we tend to drift off. And so I thought either Graham or Michael could choose something on that, and then we could focus on that next week. And by doing that, it gives us a chance, and again, just to participate more in these, in an active way in these classes that we're having here, and that you can take something away with you when you go, to think about a little bit. Like, for instance, say Michael chose memory, just as an example. Then we would, including myself, of course, would go away and think about that and how that might tie in with mindfulness, or even if it doesn't tie in with mindfulness, how it's important or challenging in your own life, and just write a few things down about that. And then we can explore that in relation to going to the center of mindfulness. Does that make sense? Is that okay? Just let me know if that's too confrontatorial or asking too much of you. You think it is?
No.
You okay with that, Graham?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So, Dean, without trying to put you on the spot, but obviously putting you on the spot, vulnerability, anything you want to say about that? And then I've got a little something to say as well.
I think I still need to connect with my vulnerabilities, to be honest with you. I think I've been disconnected from them for a long time.
Okay.
So I could ramble on probably. I don't know, there was something you said last time about PTSD and dealing with traumas, and I think part of that is coming to terms with your vulnerabilities and understanding them better, and I'm still going through that.
How does PTSD link in with vulnerability, do you think, for you?
Well, I think that you were saying that part of the way that you described it last time, I believe, was vulnerabilities are peeling back the mask, something along those lines. And I think that I've put on a lot of masks and put up a facade, which I like to call the hospitality phase, for a very long time, to appease other people and to, I guess, hide my true self or the traumas that I've had in the past. So in doing so, or trying to understand my vulnerabilities, I don't think that I've understood them nor embraced them for a long time. And I think that's to do with a lot of the traumas that have previously been there and me trying to hide them.
Why do you think you are hiding your traumas, or you need to hide your traumas, or that you're actually
brave face?
Big fun?
Put on a brave face, harden up mentality. There's lots of things there. They're things that have been said 100 times before in 1,000 different ways, like father, like son. Yeah, there's lots of reasons. I think that I'm connecting with myself a lot better than I used to, but I still think that, yeah, I try and put on a facade for other people, to keep them happy. And yeah, like, I guess just not want to confront those shitty feelings in my life about things that have happened. It hurts.
Yeah. I'm not going to go deep into trauma therapy at this stage, obviously, because
Yeah.
But sometimes you can fast track. I was just thinking this while you were talking. Certain things that have bothered us for a long time, most of our life, and sometimes that fast tracking is a simple tweaking of our understanding about something. And for instance, and this will actually come up in some of the other classes, but one of the glues, let's put it that way, that have that keep trauma or memories of trauma sticking to us. And that's sort of what you're describing there. And the fact that you then need to put on a brave face or show a part of yourself which isn't really yourself, perhaps in that moment completely, is blame. So obviously, there's traumas that are obviously beyond your control. If you're living in a house and you've done everything you can to prevent a bushfire and the bushfire comes and wipes it all out, well, I mean, that's going to be something that you have to process and live with. But a lot of other things have happened in our life, and we keep them alive to some extent because we haven't gone deeply into them enough to actually figure out what part we played in those. And unless we do that, and by the way, that's if you're into AA, that's either the second or third one. I can't remember exactly. One of the tenets, the 12 principles of AA, is that you take a deep mental inventory of what has brought you to this particular place. And I don't want to make this sound like AA, but it's interesting that they've recognized this as well. And then somehow by doing that, you feel the responsibility that you've played in those things that you now feel either traumatized by or uncomfortable with. And that is quite revelatory, and it's very discomforting initially. It's a confrontation to the ego, because when you blame, you separate yourself from responsibility. And in some ways, it's a defense mechanism, so we don't go completely insane in the moment. But eventually, you have to fess up. Eventually, you have to show up in the now and do that mental inventory and stop blaming. Now, I'm not saying, like I said, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying all trauma will be healed and recovered from that. But I mean, a lot of what we hang on to can be alleviated by what I've just described. Does that make sense, Dean?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I'm working on at the moment, and it's a big but. I mean, there's a lot there. There's a lot there. There's a lot of pillars to my addiction, and that's the only way I can explain it. So I'm looking at each one, but yeah, the whole forgive others and forgive yourself thing, easier said than done initially. So it's still a work in progress for me.
Yeah, right. So I'm definitely not talking about forgive others and forgive yourself. Blame is a much more difficult thing to do. And first of all, you have to recognize that you're blaming. Nothing's going to happen. And that's what mindfulness is all about, being aware of what we're doing and what we've been doing for so long. And I don't mean to pick on you, because we're all the same, in the sense that we've chosen to blame something. And sometimes you see people exemplify that in broad daylight, loud and clear. You just have to watch the news. You have to see social media. You'll see people with a tirade of blame. Of course, for us in our daily lives, it's much more subtle than that. Maybe we wouldn't come out and actually express it all that way. But anyway, the point of what I was trying to say was that one tool that you can fast track some of this stuff that's haunting you, let's put it that way, is to focus in on the blame. How are you blaming? Where are you blaming? Why are you blaming? Have you even been blaming? What is blame? That sort of thing. And that'll come up actually in this talk. The Lady Brown actually talks about that as well. It mentions blame in relation to vulnerability. You okay, Dean?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, great. Right, because I've already asked Michael and Graham last week about vulnerability. Did you guys want to add anything or comment on anything or ask anything around vulnerability?
Not really.
That's okay.
It's more or less just about asking for help, isn't it? Letting your guard down and asking for help.
That's exactly right. That is definitely one of the aspects of it.
Yeah, I've had a little bit to do with AA over the years. I haven't done the steps, but yeah, you mentioned step 4, which is we made a fearless and moral inventory of ourselves.
Great.
Yeah, first we admit we had a problem, and then asking for help, basically. And then, as you said, step 4 is about laying all the shit out on the table, even all the dark stuff. As Dean was saying, with addiction. And then step 5 is about sharing that with someone you trust, and with a higher power and with another human being, and admitting it all to yourself. It's about finding your part in it, not what others did to you, but where you've gone wrong.
Yep.
And trying to rectify that down the track in the later steps. Yeah.
That's great.
There's nothing further along where you, on a daily basis, take a moral inventory, and when you're wrong, promptly admit it.
Yeah.
I think it's about 8 or 9. Yeah. Keeping yourself in check, making yourself accountable for your actions, that sort of thing in your daily life.
That's
being able to admit when you're wrong.
That's right. That's right.
Trying to change ways, which is hard.
Yeah, it requires effort to be conscious. Absolutely.
Yeah, you've got to develop a vigilance.
Yeah.
Every day for practice is, like in AA, as far as AA goes, every day you've got to practice the program, otherwise, yeah. The little slogan at the end, work it. It works if you work it. So work it because you're worth it. Yeah, all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to get back into the meetings, as you can probably tell.
Yeah, right.
It's good.
There's a lot of wisdom in those 12 steps. What we need to also be, without being too hyper vigilant, because there's a state where we can be too hyper vigilant and then miss out on all the fun and the enjoyment of actually being alive. So there's this, you might say there's a thin line that we walk, and I think we all do that to some degree. But you said a very profound thing there too, Graham, and that is, and I've written down a couple of little 2 points that are personal to me in regard to vulnerabilities. And what you mentioned was that basically, if you're honest with yourself, you'll realize that you're not exempt from making mistakes, falling off the bike, falling off the wagon, so to speak. But the clue, the trick is to get back as quickly as possible. So if you feel angry, you feel you've said something wrong or done something wrong, or eaten something that you shouldn't have eaten or whatever, well, get back as quick as you possibly can. And that takes some time, and you were alluding to that and saying that. And that's very profound. If you can build up that practice of getting back and keep moving forward, then that sort of makes the journey of being too hyper vigilant a little bit easier. Because if you're like constantly like a rabbit, scared that you're going to fuck up or make a mistake all the time, well, that's no way to live our life. I mean, life is to be enjoyed as well. So that's something definitely I've had to do. And even at this later stage of my life, it's more, I'm just saying this and expressing this now because it's become more obvious to me in the last couple of years as well. And certain things that are quite challenging to us and confronting to us, for instance, this lockdown, the coronavirus, because of the coronavirus, can be an opportunity as well, not just this one, but other things more personally in your own life, to be able to learn and implement those things that you haven't done before. Anything you want to share, Michael?
Yeah, I just keep on going back to intimacy when I see vulnerabilities. You know, it's, to me, it's, as I said last week, it's about letting people see my humanity, I suppose, seeing all my faults and being accepting of I'm human, I make mistakes, and, you know, being open to let people in, I suppose. So that kind of stuff, which, you know, often, as Dean was saying, you know, there's always a mask put on, or there always has been a mask put on in my life, and yeah, it's just things, you know, things I learned growing up. You know, how to not let people in and not let people see what's really going on. I suppose the change in that is opening up and letting people in.
I mean, you can't always let everyone in because they'll just walk over with their dirty boots. But I guess that, you know, there's an aspect of being selective. I mean, sometimes if you don't need to, what's that? I was actually saying this line to my partner the other day from the old Neil Young song. He says, I need a crowd of people, but I can't face them day to day. And it's like, well, sometimes if you can just have one person, whether it's your partner, your friend, or your brother, that you can confide in and talk to, it's not like quantity, it's quality, if you know what I mean. I mean,
oh, yeah, I understand that.
yeah. I mean, you guys, the three of you are all together there, and you've got a perfect opportunity. And I'm not telling you to do anything, but you can, you're already confiding in each other because you're actually here expressing your vulnerabilities right now between the four of us. So there's an opportunity there. So you can actually get to know someone. I mean, really, we're sort of stuck in this illusion where we think we have to be so protective of ourselves, and yet as human beings we have a bullshit monitor that's just hyper evolved, and what has happened over the years, where we're scanning, we're constantly on the lookout for someone who's actually speaking their truth, so to speak. You know what I mean? So it's very refreshing when you see someone expressing their vulnerabilities. It's either humorous, refreshing, or liberating for all involved when you see that. So I guess there's a challenge for us to be ourselves in these situations, because that's, you know, I see it even more in this time of lockdown, that being a human being is we are very connected and dependent on each other. And I don't mean dependent in a negative way. I mean in a way that enables us to feel our humanity, able to express our kindness and concern and affection and love and compassion, those things. So we're here, stuck together, so to speak, and let's make it as enjoyable as we can. And one way is to realize that, you know, we're in this boat together, and a lot of the things that we hold so close to ourselves and don't want anyone else to see, what we're not aware of in that moment is that the other people who are in front of us, or the person who's in front of us, is exactly going through, or has been through, or will go through those particular things as well, those uncertainties, those uncomfortable feelings. So that okay, Michael?
Yeah.
Was there anything else you wanted to say?
No.
I'm going to put this to a vote. You want to hear about my vulnerabilities, or would you like me to put that talk on right now? And please don't try to be nice to me. Just, what do you want?
I don't mind, I'm happy.
Whatever you're comfortable with, huh?
Yeah.
Okay.
I want to hear your vulnerability.
Yeah.
Who said that? Oh my God.
Get it out.
I was trying to weasel out of that, but it didn't work. All right. I'll go through this quickly, as quickly as I can. I identified two main vulnerabilities at the moment. Of course, there's been more and there are more, but this is what's come. I spent 20 minutes writing this down before the class today, and I was thinking about it last night. So the first one, I did actually mention this a little bit the other day, but rejection. Rejection is one of my vulnerabilities. And why am I saying this in regards to, because if you have a vulnerability and you haven't taken the time to investigate it a little bit more deeper, which is what we're doing today, the whole point that it's a vulnerability is that you will do something or think something or feel something that is uncomfortable to you, or your behavior will become bad, right? That's what makes it a vulnerability. Otherwise, we'd all be just fantastic all the bloody time. So, and my vulnerabilities at a particular time aren't necessarily the same as Dean's or Graham's or Michael's. So anyway, so mine is, and I'm sure some of you can, is rejection. So when I'm rejected, another way of expressing what I just said in regards to vulnerabilities is a button. So it's one of my buttons. You want to push my button, not any of you guys, and of course this usually happens with people who are very close to you. They can push children, your partner, close friends, will push your button. Or if you're in a captured audience, I've seen a few buttons pushed amongst you guys, not you three particularly, but people there at Freeman House, because you're thrown in together. It's like a family. You don't get a choice. You're there. So, and sometimes people will recognize your button. So one of my buttons or vulnerabilities is rejection. Or another way to put it, non-acceptance of my idea or point of view. Or, and this gets deeper, things don't go the way I had hoped or planned or expected, especially when I have given something a lot of thought or put work, time, energy into it. So that's a subtle difference from rejection. But the reason I put that down is because that actually happened to me 2 days ago. I put a lot of time and energy into, because one of the other things I do apart from nutrition is I work with toxicology, and I work with a lab in Lismore and have been doing that for the last 6 years. I put forward a proposal and researched it and blah, blah, blah. And basically, in a subtle way, I was told, well, no, you shouldn't, because he's such a, we get on really well, but just basically, no, that's not a good path to particularly take. Now, what then happens when you have a vulnerability, and as I say, a button's been pushed? So for me, and it's different for all of us, what happens is I feel down. So this is feeling down. I guess the extreme of feeling down is being depressed. I'm feeling down, even perhaps a little depressed. Geez, I've just put a lot of myself into it, blah, blah, blah. And I might feel like giving up. Like I've been working on this project together with the lab for 5-6 years. So I'm thinking, catastrophic thinking. Psychology calls that catastrophic thinking. So you don't get what you expected. And so I'm become aware of this, and you have to become aware of this in your own life. Why? Because to avoid doing something stupid. Sometimes you do something stupid long term, but sometimes you can just do something stupid short term. So giving up, or the thought comes, well, maybe I should change. Maybe I've been doing this for a while. Maybe I should take a different tack. Should change. By the way, when we have these vulnerabilities and when these things come up, like for me, and it's actually valid to ask questions like, am I actually doing the right thing? You know, I actually feel pretty bad about this. Maybe it's just temporary, and it is. It was just 24 hours for me. I got over it and got back on my horse. But maybe feeling down is actually, and I heard this on the news last night. Well, it's actually on the drum. Every now and then you'll get someone who's astute and wise and had worldly experience. And I actually heard this line before when I did my psychology course last year. And it goes, he said, don't pathologize feeling sad. Anyone know what that means or what that's implying? Does anyone know? What's that?
Dissecting it and looking right into it.
Yep, that's absolutely a start. So in medical terms or psychological terms, pathologize means that you take something and if you have it, you're sick. And then, as you said, Michael, you dissect it, you work out, is there a medication for this? Work out a cure, right? That's what pathologize means. So it's quite controversial and it's quite interesting because we had to look into this. So what I'm saying is sometimes feeling sad, you don't have to think that there's something wrong with you or that you're sick or that you have to take a medication for it. Depression is a different thing. And you have to be aware that this happens a lot in medicine. They've actually pathologized a lot of things, and this is just my thing, not against medication, but some illnesses don't need to be pathologized. They just need to be worked through. Something's changing in the person. So for me, when things don't go my way, one of the things is it comes up and I allow myself to look again, to feel into, well, I'm feeling sad. Is it now, this is a good time, this is a stimulus to investigate, am I on the right track? Am I doing the right thing? And of course, here's the thing. When you're angry or depressed or anxious, you don't actually do anything. You don't make any changes. I mean within that time when you're deeply exploring that feeling, and you don't react, which is one of the principles of mindfulness, where you can look at what's going on within you, explore all the possibilities. Oh, is it time for me to change what I'm doing? That's a valid question. Anyway, so that's one of my vulnerabilities. The other one is being ignored. I realized I don't like to be ignored, and I've had this since I was a child. And just quickly, what happens to me when I'm ignored? Because I'm such a fun-loving, charismatic character, I'm joking there, I'm not ignored that much now. But of course, that happens with someone you're close to. So mostly what I'm expressing is learning about and through relationships, whether they're intimate relationships or the familial relationships or friend relationships. So what happens to me when I'm ignored? I get angry. I brood and get moody. I can seek revenge. Before you think I'm an absolute arsehole and prick as I go on in this, I have learnt how to obviate these tendencies inside of myself. And more so, again, interestingly, in the last 5 years. Strange. And I'm not saying you have to wait till you're my age, Dean, before you can come to this wisdom. My father did say, I will learn the hard way. So I am definitely a slow learner. So seek revenge. Yes, this is what I do when I'm ignored. Rant and babble and become hysterical and illogical and possibly unkind. I've noticed all these behaviours in regards to linked in to being ignored. The interesting thing is that once you start to notice these things in relation to a button being pushed, you are so much more empowered. And this is really relevant to what you were saying, Graham, about the steps in AA. When you notice these things, and particularly when they link into a button, it empowers you because you can start to see how things pan out. You can have a prognosis, so to speak, for what's going to happen if you act out and behave in this particular way. And this is how I acted out. This is how I've probably done this since I was a kid. And the last one was panic and anxiety, or you might say anxiety and panic, because panic usually comes from anxiety. So this is the things I've noticed about myself. So here's the good news. Knowing this and putting this together cognitively, because once you feel angry, it's a feeling in the pit of your stomach you just don't like. So then it's a matter of learning that, nipping it in the bud, shaking it off, moving on as quickly as possible. And that's basically all I've been able to do. Am I exempt from being ignored and having my button pushed now that I've said all these things? No, of course not. But at least I'm not going to do something too stupid. And the good news is that you recover a lot quicker as time goes on. So instead of taking 3 days of being broody and, all moody and all that, it might now be an hour. Really powerful stuff if you give it a chance and let that go. I have a companion here in my room, this fly, so every now and then that's what I'm doing. I'm not just waving at you. Okay. Are you happy, Dean? There, my 2 vulnerabilities. Good. Right. Are we ready for this talk? Now it's a 20-minute talk. Try it. There's a lot in it. It's about vulnerabilities. It's actually called The Power of Vulnerability. It's this lady called Brené Brown speaking, and I'm showing you this because she's had time to go deep into this particular area. Doesn't mean that this 20 minutes is everything to do with vulnerability, because we've been saying unique things even now in this little time that aren't covered in there. But if you find yourself, one of the, and that's actually one of the things on that slide there, is to do with mindfulness, is to listen. Listen, we're not going to have time to do the meditation today anyway, so take this time, this 20 minutes, as a form of meditation, meaning that practice your skill of listening. If you find yourself drifting off in your mind while you're listening, which is what we all do, come back. Again, it's a practice. You get good at it. And then you can't remember or absorb anything if you're not paying attention. You'll hear the talking in the background, but it's not going to be retained or allow you to reflect on it or think about it. So if you can take one thing from it, that's awesome. At this point in the class, we listened to a 20-minute audio clip of Brené Brown, and it taken from a YouTube TED Talk she gave a couple of years ago, particularly addressing vulnerability. And we haven't got that audio here as a recording of this class. Obviously, it's copyrighted, and you can see that talk yourself by just going and typing in Brené Brown vulnerability on Google, and you will find it. Thank you. if anyone's triggered, if anyone wants to talk to me after we finished, you're welcome to. Anyone want to say anything?
I wasn't triggered. I found myself pretty emotional with what you were saying, or some of the stuff you were saying.
I enjoyed listening to it. I'd heard it before several years ago, and it was interesting. She said a couple of things that related to the buttons or the vulnerabilities I was expressing before in a way I hadn't heard before. So gives me something more to think about.
Is that on YouTube? Is it?
Yeah, that's what. Yep, exactly. That's from I downloaded it from YouTube. That's from a series of talks called TED Talks. Some of you may have heard of those. Anyone heard of those? Yeah. So people over the years have, usually people with an expertise or a passion in a particular area, get up and give a 20-minute talk. They have to do the whole talk, even though they might have a lifetime of experience in 20 minutes communicating what their things about. Anyway, so that's what that was. Every now and then I'll show something like that or something that's relevant to what we're talking about. Could you all hear that okay?
Yeah, fine.
Perfect.
Right.
Not a little bit, but it's all right.
You can sit up here.
Yeah, you're up front next week, mate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. On Friday, you'll be there. Front row. Well, I think we'll leave it at that for today. Does anyone want to stay behind and talk to me, or you're all okay?
No, that was awesome. Thank you. I really enjoyed that, Hart.
I've just got one question. What was that woman's first name? Brown?
Her name is Brene. It's spelled B-R-E-N-E. And the last E has an acute on it, like they do in the French. So the E becomes an A.
Renee.
Brene Brown. Brown. But she sounds
Brene Brown from Bruley.
And the talk was called The Power of Vulnerability, and it was done a couple of years ago. All right, thank you for your feedback, yeah, I'll see you on Friday. I'm looking forward to finding out as much as I possibly can about vitamin C, yeah, we'll have some fun. Last thing, does anyone want to pick something now that we've dived deep into vulnerability? We can move on to something else. Anyone like to pick anything on that mandala that helps bring us closer to the center? Brian?
Yeah.
What?
Listening.
Listening.
You're thinking what?
Listening. My favourite subject.
Listening. What?
All right. So listen up. I want you all to think about listening. What are the ins and outs of listening, the perturbations, blah, 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 and come next Wednesday to the mindfulness class and present your wisdom and experience and whatever you might have in relation to wisdom, and we can explore that. Otherwise, I'll see you on Friday at 9:30, and we'll dive deep into vitamin.
Thanks, man.
Thank you,
guys. Thank you. See you. Be well.
See you, mate. You too.